We are live, Chair. You can go ahead with the meeting.
Thank you, Charles. Okay. Well, welcome everyone to today's meeting of the panel. If you have any technical difficulties during the meeting, then please contact the Democratic Services Officer on call, who will attempt to assist you. Today's officer on call is Katie Brewer, and the number to call is 577046. I would ask participants, when you are not speaking, please mute your microphone. Microphones must only be on if the participant has been granted my permission to speak, and to gain my permission to speak, please indicate on the chat, and I will then make a note and call you when it's your turn. And if I miss you, I'm sure Charles will remind me. Members, before we start the meeting, it would be impossible for me to conduct tonight's meeting without referencing Peter Campbell. I'm sure you're all aware that Peter died earlier this week. And to my mind, really, Peter was Mr. Scrutiny. He'd been on the Scrutiny Panel with unbroken service since 2007. And for the last 6 years, he'd either been chair or vice chair. The thing about Peter was that he'd always read the papers. He was a tough inquisitor, but he was always fair. And more importantly, always good humour. I think that he's a real loss to the council. He will be sorely missed. I've been on this council a very long time, and I have to say that he's simply one of the best councillors that I've worked with. And I'm proud to say work with, although we were on different sides of the political spectrum, because he was somebody that was always looking for the best from this council. And whether ideas came from his side, our side, or wherever, he would support them. But equally, if he thought you got something wrong, he wouldn't waste time telling you. So, members, could we just have a few moments reflection on Peter's life and his enormous contribution to Thanet District Council? Thank you, members. I won't ask anybody else to speak at this stage. Next week, there'll be ample opportunity to pay full tribute to Peter, and I hope members will take that opportunity. Would everyone present please ensure that their mobile phones are turned to silent and that they are not used to make or receive phone calls whilst the meeting is in progress. Please also refrain from checking emails and ensure that you are in a quiet room for the duration of the meeting. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed for members of the public. The meeting will also be recorded and will subsequently be broadcast on the internet. Please can I ask the members of the panel to confirm that they are present in the meeting when I read out your name. Councillor Boyd.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Coleman-Cook.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Hopkinson.
Yeah, I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Huxley.
I'm here, Chair.
Councillor Keane.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Patmore.
Here, Chair.
Councillor Paul Moore. Councillor Paul Moore. Councillor Linda Piper. Councillor Piper. Councillor Rattigan. Councillor Roper.
Here, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Rozecki. And Councillor Scott.
Here, Chair.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair. Councillor Curry here. I've just been added to review and scrutiny, so I'm probably at the bottom of the list.
Councillor Curry, how could I have forgotten? How could I have forgotten? Sorry about that.
That's okay.
The thing is, Councillor Curry, are you here?
I think so, yeah.
Oh, good. Excellent. All right. Fine. I've received the following request to speak under 20.1. It's Councillor Garner on item 9. Are you here, Councillor Garner?
I'm here, yes.
Are there any more members who wish to speak under 20.1?
Councillor Bailey on agenda item 7, please.
Councillor Bailey. Okay. Before I forget you, Councillor Bailey, I'm sure you'll remind me that you're here.
Okay, thanks.
Item 7. Lovely. Thank you. I've also received a request to speak from a member of the public. That's Ms. Deb Shotton, who's going to speak on agenda item 9. Okay, moving on to the agenda. Apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies, Charles?
None that I've received, Chair, but I did notice that in the appointments I sent out, Councillor Piper declined. So I want to assume it might be an apology, but she didn't say that directly to me.
Okay, thank you. And obviously we've got a couple of members who aren't here at the moment, but may turn up. Okay. Right. Members, does anybody have any declarations of interest? I can't see anybody indicating, so I'll take that as a no. Agenda item 3, to approve the minutes of the Overview and Scrutiny Panel meeting held on the 19th of January. Copy was attached to the agenda pack. Can I have a proposer, please?
I'll propose that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Cook, and a seconder, please.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Curry. Thank you. Okay. Unless I hear any objection, I will take these as approved. Okay, they are approved, members. I'm bringing forward agenda item 12, which is the election of vice chair. We'll take this item first, but then we'll go back to the correct order of the agenda. And this appeared on a supplementary agenda. I'm calling for nominations for the vacant post of vice chair to the panel to serve for the remainder of the municipal year 2021. Now, it's convention that this panel is chaired by a member of the opposition, and the vice chair is usually a member of the controlling group. So the Conservative group have no intention of nominating anybody. So do we have any nominations?
Yes, Chair. I'd like to nominate Councillor Alan Curry.
Thank you. Does that find a seconder?
I'd like to second that, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Councillor Moore. Do we have any other nominations? No. So as there are none, then the person, Councillor Curry, I believe that makes you duly elected. So welcome to the panel, and look forward to working with you for the remainder of this municipal year, and who knows beyond that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, members and officers.
Thank you. Okay, members, agenda item 4, Dog Public Spaces Protection Order Amendments. I will call on Jasmine Vickers to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to share my screen. So bear with me while I do that. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see that okay.
Yes, so I can anyway.
Okay, so this is to present the report on the dog PSPO Public Spaces Protection Order proposed amendments for 2021. So we already have a Public Spaces Protection Order in force in relation to dog control. And this covers dog fouling, dog exclusion and dog control, just to clarify. And that was adopted on the 25th of October 2017 and extended until the 25th of October 2023. So overall, just to give a brief update on the background of the dog PSPO, the 3-year restrictions have had a positive impact. They've had lots of positive impacts, some of them on the district's coastal bathing water quality and the cleanliness of our beaches, but also with other dog-related antisocial behaviour around some of our other parks and open spaces. The order has also helped with the conservation of some of our really important wildlife populations around Thanet and our conservation designations, particularly at places like Pegwell Bay. And so some of the amendments that we're going to be talking about tonight are in relation to that particular issue. So we, on the back of having contact from members of the public, some of our other partner agencies and from various other sources, we started a consultation on some amendments to our existing dog PSPO. So the majority of the PSPO will remain the same as what it has been. So the majority of the rules around that remain exactly the same. There are 3 very specific amendments that we proposed for consultation on as a result of feedback that we had from the public. So the following 3 changes were proposed as part of a consultation. So the first one was that at Westbrook Bay, currently that the dogs are on a lead order there might be changed to become a dog ban just in bathing season. As a result of the consultation, the majority of people voted against changing it, and therefore we're not expecting to move forward with any amendment to the PSPO on that. The second amendment proposed was about Pegwell Bay, and this was in relation to our conservation designations at that location, and the fact that we do have some restrictions there, but there has been a call to extend those restrictions to cover what we refer to as the upper chalk shore, so to encompass the whole of that bay with dog restriction. And the third amendment was around activities that could be banned to help us protect wildlife. And this, again, part of this is that people have complained. They have seen people using dogs to disturb bird life and other wildlife around our coast. And so this enables us to deal with that particular form of antisocial behaviour and disruption to our important conservation sites. So options B and C through the consultation were responded to positively by the public. And so what we are proposing through this report is that the amendments to the PSPO move forward as follows. So we make the amendments with regard to options B and C, proposals B and C, about Pegwell Bay, extending the restriction there, and about protecting wildlife generally around our coastline. The amendment around Westbrook Bay, as a result of people responding and saying they didn't want to change the situation at Westbrook Bay, we're not proposing to take that amendment forward. So this is just a quick summary of the levels of the feedback, the percentages. So you can see that for Pegwell Bay, and for the wildlife protection, we had quite a clear majority there of people that supported those proposals. And for Westbrook, it was a bit tighter in terms of people who came back agreeing and those that came back disagreeing. And as a result of that, we did suggest potentially going back out to a consultation again. And in the end, what we are proposing is that we just accept the results of this consultation and move forward. We are able to revisit amendments to the PSPO annually, so we can always come back to some of these issues and new issues as they arise. And so just to finish up, that's our map currently of where you can take your dog. And one of the things that has been really positive as a result of the Public Spaces Protection Order is that actually we came up with this communications method and it's been really well received. So we have these maps available at lots of locations and people are able to see really clearly where they can and where they can't take their dog for exercise. So hopefully that's nice and accessible for the public to be able to access. And so I'm happy to take questions on the dog PSPO now.
Okay, members, does anybody have a question? There's nobody in the chat at the moment. Councillor Scott's arrived. Okay, Councillor Moore's arrived, which is good. And Linda Piper's arrived. So I think everybody's there. So in terms of now somebody speaking, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my question was just those posters look really good, and I wondered if we could have them actually displayed along the coast so that people, if they turned up at the wrong place, knew where else they could go.
Yes, so we are currently looking at reviewing all of our coastal signage. So we have a lot of different types of signage around our coast that we do want to tidy up anyway. And we do have the maps displayed at some places, but probably not as widely as we could. And I don't think they're big enough at the moment. So that is absolutely something that we are looking to encompass in a bigger signage review that we want to get going with this season.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, my internet's a bit funny at the moment, so if I do cut out, I will try and come back to it. Just a couple of questions regarding the Westbrook Bay situation. Firstly, I want to know, how did you engage with the public? Because it seemed a lot of it was done via sort of online or email. Obviously, moving forward and COVID allowing, is it possible to do more sort of face-to-face engagement out there on the bays with the bay users? You know, having an iPad or a tablet or Chromebook or whatever, and getting that initial response, because I think people might be more engaging. And secondly, how much work was done to explain to people the effects that dogs may have on our blue flag accreditation? And the last one is, from looking at the figures, and I've done a tiny bit of maths, but 42 and 52 doesn't add up to 100. So I just wondered what the additional, I think it's 6%, what they answered, because that makes a big difference. So was it don't care, unsure, neither disagree or agree? Because otherwise that 52 really isn't much of a majority. And also particularly if you look at 259 people in total, that's only about 135 people against the 109, which means 15 people haven't answered. So it's too close. I wouldn't say it's an overwhelming majority. But just those kind of questions, really.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Yes, I will start with the last question first. So the percentage that is missing is in relation to responses that were received, but they weren't answering either yes or no. So they sat somewhere in the middle. They gave an opinion on something else dog related, or they sat on the fence with it. They didn't indicate either way. So they're the ones that are missing from those percentages. But we have got the detail of those. So although they didn't answer one way or the other, they still gave us important feedback, which we have looked at. In terms of the types of promotion of the consultation, this was slightly before I took over the enforcement team. So the feedback that I've had is that, yes, they did go out and they did promote through all the usual channels that we would with public consultation. I think you've probably hit the nail on the head that the bit that's missing from that is having somebody out there and physically engaging with dog walkers on the beach and capturing the actual users. So that's a really interesting point that we would definitely take forward for future consultations. We always follow the guidance that comes from government about how to consult and engage with the public, and we do it through our communications team, obviously. However, I do think that with something like this, there's probably some really specific and targeted work that we could do with those actual users at that location again. So yeah, but I think it's definitely learning for the future. And certainly with the coastal PSPO, one of the things that we have tried to do is, even though it has been via email because of the current situation that we find ourselves in, and not doing as much face-to-face and drop-in sessions and things like that, we have done more targeted emails to people, and we have tried to pick out of the wider consultation document that's quite is aimed at everyone, I suppose. We've tried to pick out and highlight the issues for certain groups and email them directly with that. So targeted consultation is definitely something we're looking at moving forward and improving on that.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Councillor Piper. Oh, sorry, Kerry, did you want to come back?
It was just in terms of, obviously you mentioned targeted and specifically about going out and talking to dog walkers who probably would have a biased view. So I was just making sure that you would talk to, the average Joe that's walking down the beach, and Sally who's got her 2 kids there, or something like that. So it's not going to be just dog walkers that respond.
Absolutely, yeah. Beach users was probably what I should have said. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Piper.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for being so late. There was a technical hiccup. And so I missed most of your presentation, Jasmine, except the diagram that you showed at the very end. I thought that was very clear and a good idea. And if we distribute that a lot, I think along the railings and beaches and so on, that would help to clarify not just dog owners, but all people who just like to walk along the beach. They get quite excited, think, oh, is that dog supposed to be there? And if there's a diagram, I think that would help residents who don't own dogs as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Members, I can't see anybody else wanting to speak. Jasmine, you've heard 1 or 2 comments that people have made and suggestions. But I think it's fair to say that the panel is happy with your proposal, I think, which is option 1 on the report that's going to Cabinet. Is that agreed, members? I see some nodding, so we'll take... Oh, sorry, Councillor Moore, a late entry for a question.
Yes, sorry, Chair. Late by nature and late by this one. I apologise for being late. Again, it was access that was an issue, and I did miss the presentation. I just confirm we are just talking about the dog walkers as this first bit. There wasn't too much in that first 5 minutes that Jasmine gave, because I've got issues with the PSPO regarding bay users and that sort of thing. So that hasn't come up yet, has it?
No, you've got plenty of time to work up to that one, Councillor Moore.
Thank you, Chair.
That one's for later.
No, thank you very much.
If you want to go and limber up, ready for your battle with Councillor Moore later on, feel free.
No, we're singing from the same hymn page, Jasmine.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you. So thank you, Jasmine, for that. Right, members, moving on. Agenda item 5, Cabinet presentation, an overview of estates and economic development portfolio areas. Can I welcome Councillor Duckworth and invite her to make her presentation? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boys, and thank you for inviting me to talk to you about my portfolio. So I have some notes here. I cover, my title is Economic Development and Estates, which covers, I'll just run through quickly what it covers as well. So it's economic development, and the officer I deal with mostly on that is Louise Askew. Climate emergency, I'm chair of the climate emergency, so I deal with Dr. Hannah Scott mostly on that one. Tourism and beach management. This crosses over a lot with Councillor Alban's areas. Corporate property and land is estates, which I'll come to later. Facilities management, well, COVID-19 has meant that I haven't done much of this. And building control comes under planning. Heritage and museums, that's connected to tourism, it's connected to estates, and it's connected to economic development in a regeneration sense. So economic development, much of economic development in Thanet is connected to external funding. We've also been administrating the COVID grants provided by government, but that's been done through Civica and overseen by Finance. And so that would be Councillor Yates's brief. And And it's all really to do with the fact that we're a small local authority, so there is a lot of cross-departmental work. The function of economic development crosses over a number of different service areas. There's the regeneration team. So the team has to focus on economic growth, levelling up, including responding to government releases of funding. The team includes Director of Regeneration, Tourism Manager, with a small tourism and visitor information team. There's a Heritage Action Zone Manager and a Project Manager. So key current areas of work include the Margate Town Deal, which I spent a lot of time on, Ramsgate Future High Street, Ramsgate Heritage Action Zone, using heritage to support the economy, High Street's Heritage Action Zone for Ramsgate, and we're negotiating with Historic England to finalise the project. Historic England Heritage at Risk, COVID funding, we have 2 schemes for just under 25,000 for Pullmite repairs in Ramsgate and specialist services to understand the costs associated with the Theatre Royal. We're putting together and delivered the programme of work for the reopening of high streets safely, funding allocated by central government through the ERDF programme. Tourism. In 2019, tourism contributed at least 352 million to the Thanet economy, each year supporting 8,664 jobs. These jobs equate to about 19% of Thanet's jobs. We're looking to engage specialist consultants to understand the options and feasibility of developments at the Westbrook Loggia. This is due to start about the end of March and will inform the Cabinet of the best options and route to taking forward the asset for redevelopment. Officers have procured specialist services to put together a feasibility and options for a beach club in Ramsgate on the Marina Car Park site. This report will come to Cabinet for discussion on the best option and route to taking the project forward. We're working with KCC Growth Hub on programmes and initiatives which will support the local economy post-lockdown. Right, I'll just run through estates as well. So estates is really property and asset management, and the property services covers several areas of activity. Management of the council's commercial property investment portfolio, where the council receives rental income from its freehold properties to contribute towards the overall TDC revenue to provide council services. This involves dealing with tenants, with estate management and repairs issues, rent review and lease renewal negotiations, new lettings of vacant property, engaging local agents. We are currently looking at how to approach this strategically, to find and implement cost-effective ways to have more proactive estate management, meeting best practice asset management protocol, both enhancing rental income and adding long-term capital growth. Management of the council's foreshore and other leisure type properties. And again, this tends to overlap with Councillor Albin's areas in operations. This involves similar asset management activity, although also having the right type of tenants to provide services that residents and visitors seek, influences some of the decisions, liaising cross-service with other teams, finding a balance between outright financial considerations and the right resident and visitor provision from local businesses. We also have in-house professional property services to other council service areas regarding their operational property that could be council offices, depots, the port and many more. Whether the council is owner-occupier, tenant or landlord letting out surplus space, a full range of commercial, property and surveyor services is needed and provided by the property team. This is sometimes referred to as the corporate landlord model, although in reality that involves a higher division between provision of council services and the provision of property facilities, which some public bodies have adopted. Property asset disposals, including the sale of assets on the open market and also by community asset transfer. So open market property sales are as agreed by Cabinet for a variety of reasons, raising capital for other capital expenditure schemes. Community asset transfers are done within the strict guidelines of the Localism Act. All disposals are carried out to achieve best value as obliged by legislation. Handling the annual asset valuation. using independent surveyors and valuers and meeting all the statutory requirements in liaison with the finance team. Providing expert property advice to the council on major projects. This includes strategic advice on the council's future corporate occupational needs, liaising with regeneration colleagues and contributing the property advice and negotiations element to upcoming initiatives such as future high street funding, the town fund and similar potential projects. So that's a brief run through of my portfolio, especially economic development and estates. So happy to take questions now.
Thank you, Councillor Duckworth. Members, over to you. The silence is deafening. Councillor Duckworth, can I ask you something? The tourism figures you gave, did you say they were for 2019?
I believe, yeah, it said say 2019, yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any, probably, a bit unfair in a way, but do you have any feel for what 2020 might have been like?
Well, I'll sort of, I may pass you over to Louise Askew if she's here, but obviously there are a lot of people coming in 2020 because of coronavirus. I think we all noticed that because they couldn't go abroad. How we would measure that, I'm not really quite sure, because there are a lot of people coming, and at parts of the time there were lots of people on the beach, and they wouldn't have been able to. There would have been no facilities for them. There would have been nowhere for them to go in terms of spending money. So I don't know if Louise is here and can give any further.
I saw Louise earlier. I don't know.
Yeah, I am here.
Louise, would you like to come in on that one?
Yeah, I mean, we've worked really hard with the sector since we went into lockdown in March, and have engaged with them all through the period, sending out a weekly newsletter with information about what's available, what support there is. And I think it's a mixed picture in terms of the businesses and how this has impacted them. Some businesses have flown in terms of doing takeaway services and things like that, and others have just kind of shut down, battened down the hatches and are waiting. I think the challenge will be that we have the majority of our businesses in this sector are independent and small, and so it does hit them harder. But we have been working with the businesses in the sector, as I said, all the way through to try and support them where we can and help them understand how, as we start to come out of lockdown, how they can be better supported. And we've also been lobbying central government as well.
Yeah, I mean, do you, again, probably not a very fair question, but do you have any feel at this stage as to whether there are a significant number of businesses that will be unlikely to operate in the future, that have gone forever?
I mean, again, this is where we liaise with finance, because I'm hoping that the grants that have been available are going to help a lot of businesses to stay afloat. It's difficult to, it's difficult to say, and I think some may have been having difficulties anyway, and it's just what's tipped them over. They might have managed to survive, but I don't think we've got anywhere near figures yet, unless Louise has.
No. Okay, and no feeling for whether any town was hit worse than others or did better than others to weather it.
I think this is possibly something that we could, Chairman, if you don't mind me just.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
I think obviously this is probably some information that we may be able to obtain from the KCC Growth Hub, because I know they have been heavily engaged in providing advice to businesses and obtaining some data. So, and KCC also have the economic unit that they set up. So I suspect it's something we could put a request in to KCC to see what information they've got on that, because I think it's an entirely valid question and does need to inform some of our approach to recovery, which we're now thinking about along with the county. and as part of those structures. I think part of the challenge is a lot of the data comes through the businesses themselves, and if they haven't been functioning and been open, it's quite difficult then to be able to collect it. So I suspect it will be more through activities that through phone calls and information that's being received directly from businesses who have been looking for advice. I don't know if Louise wanted to add anything more to that, but I don't think we're going to have perfect information just because of some of the usual way we collect it just hasn't been available for that summer.
From a tourism perspective, we can easily find out from the businesses because we work really closely with them. And as Maslin said, the Growth Hub have been surveying businesses regularly, and we do get that information. It's challenging. I think the honest answer to some of that is the unknown, and it's the unknown of how long those businesses aren't going to be able to run as they would have normally, and the impact that the social distancing, etc., will have in the longer term, and the impact on how people behave, and how less people may want to go out or go and stay somewhere else. So that's still a lot of unknowns, and I think businesses are just waiting.
Thank you. Councillor Piper, has your question been answered in the chat by Madeline?
Yes, it has. Thank you, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Boyd, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair. It's part question, part comment. If COVID aside, Thanet, I think, has traditionally struggled in terms of having the tourism and leisure extend throughout the year. We're very much a summer orientated place, very much targeted at the beach. So I'm just wondering, would there be any work around how can we promote tourism and leisure use within our lovely district all year round? So how can we attract people in the winter so that we still get commerce coming in throughout the year, so we're not just solely relying on those 4 or 5 glorious sunny spells? Obviously we have Dreamland, which sometimes has a festive fairground and things like that, but what else can we do to attract people here during the winter, even if it's not holidays, but it's people from other parts of Kent coming in? What else can we do to get that kind of all year round business, that Thanet can be a busy place all year round?
Yeah, this is something that was looked at for the Margate Town deal, and it's certainly a key theme. And I think it should spread across the whole of Thanet, not just be for Margate. And we do need to support our theatres and indoor leisure, and obviously we don't get the answer back from government until March, but on the Margate Town deal specifically. But yeah, it's a very valid point, and it's something that we're looking at all the time. I don't know if Louise wants to expand on that at all.
Yeah, happy to. I mean, generally, we don't promote the district during the summer months. Our promotion tends to be around the shoulder periods in the winter. And we look at specific markets that would be interested in different things and do more kind of focused work around those. We work with Visit Kent, so we buy into bigger campaigns that we wouldn't otherwise be able to afford on our own. And we work with some of our bigger organisations, as you mentioned, Dreamland, Turner Contemporary. There's a reason Turner Contemporary has different shows so that they encourage visitors to come throughout the year. We work with South Eastern around special offers on the trains. And we are seeing our shoulder periods reducing and that peak kind of season extending. One of our biggest areas of visitors is visiting friends and family. So they're people that do tend to stay, obviously not always in accommodation, but with friends and family, and go out and visit across the district. So there are a number of things. We have a really small budget and a really small team. So we try to make the best of certain avenues and constantly working with Visit Britain and other organisations to promote the district. But we tend to do less in the summer. It's more in those shoulder periods and winter.
Thank you. Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. I was wondering, have asset transfers been affected by COVID? And will there be a review of sites where there hasn't been any interest? I was thinking in particular somewhere like Harold Road car park in Cliftonville, which Cliftonville West councillors would like to retain. We think in the future, somewhere like Harold Road car park would be a real sort of financial benefit to the council. Thank you.
Well, I have to tell you, Alan, that Harold Road car park is likely to. This is where we sell assets to raise money, and I think it's very unlikely that will come off the asset transfer list, I'm afraid. There have obviously been some delays with COVID, I think. I don't know if Rob Large would like to expand on that at all?
Yes, good evening, everybody. Just to say, I've only been here as interim director of property since the beginning of October. So obviously part of the COVID effects had already happened then. And certainly in May, my predecessor did make the decision to put some of the asset disposals for 2021 on hold at that time. Others were also put on hold for political reasons and various further discussions, and I think maybe Harold Road was one of those. And certainly we as a team have now been told to go ahead with that, and that will be one of the disposals that we'll be doing in the new financial year. Just to be clear, any disposals we do are only done with cabinet approval having been got first. And there is a budget for disposals next year, and we've identified how we're going to do that.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Moore, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Duckworth, for your presentation. I have a query with regards to, again, asset transfers, in as much as Furness Water Ski Club. I'm not sure if you're aware, but this is one of the items that's come up for disposal, and I believe you're in dialogue with the directors of that club to broker some kind of arrangement as they get first choice of refusal. But also there has been a breakdown in communication with them for some time. And I know that Jasmine and I have had dialogue yesterday regarding Furness Water Ski Club, and some of the queries they've got and aspirations they've got and reservations. Can you reassure me that this is going on and that we are liaising with them to bring this to fruition, and also to possibly also support them as a club, because they offer an amenity within our area, which the Four Shores are one of our greatest assets, and it would be nice to see that the club does remain and does get supported. But I don't mean that we finance them, I just mean that we help them to continue in what they're trying to do. Thank you.
I'm going to ask Rob Large if he can give any information on that, or if it's something we need to come back to by email or at a later meeting.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Councillor Moore, I'll need to come back to you on that. I know one of my team is dealing with a number of situations similar to that, and is liaising with the Foreshore team in Jasmine's service. So I'd like to agree to email you back on that in the next couple of days, if I may.
Yes, that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much, Rob.
Thank you. Okay, hang on. Oh, Councillor Roper, you've got a question.
Yes, thank you. Just like to ask about developer contributions. How are they calculated and what impact have they had? Because obviously with COVID that might have had a bit of a slowdown, but do you have any information on that, please? Thank you.
I don't know exactly how they're calculated. I don't know whether there's a sort of county or national formula, and I don't know if Ian Livingstone's still here to advise. It was really a bit more about economics and estates, so he may not be here to advise on that. So again,
I think that's more a planning matter rather than.
It is.
Yeah.
But Ian is here.
Sorry.
Oh, Ian, you've been spotted. There's no hiding place.
Thank you, Chair. If I may then just come back on that. I think there has been there was a slowdown of some starts in and around the district, and obviously the triggers for developer contributions are often related to either prior to occupation or prior to actually starting on sites. But actually what we have found over the past, certainly past 6 months, is that there have been more sites being completed and indeed more development going on, mainly from SME builders that are operating in the district, which has actually meant that we are now at a point where we have quite a few triggers being hit on developer contributions. And indeed, there is going to be further information that's going to be coming out in the next month in the form of an infrastructure funding statement, which will provide more details about this for the financial year 2019 to 2020, which, I mean, admittedly doesn't cover the COVID crisis, but it's just before that, with then the subsequent infrastructure funding statement, which will come out at the end of this year, which will cover then the COVID period of 2020 to 2021. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Ian. Thank you.
Okay. I can't see anyone else. I just got one last question, maybe again directed to Rob rather than anyone else. Are we happy that we're completely up to date with rent reviews on all the properties that we own, Rob?
The short answer to that, Councillor Rayford, is no. And it's something that I'm looking into, having been in this interim role for 4 months now. But due mainly to a human resource problem and to pressing needs for the estate and all the items of activity that Councillor Duckworth highlighted, those dealing with those rent reviews and lease renewals, which in some cases will include an increase in rent, some cases they may not, is running behind. And it's a problem that we're aware of and looking at ways to address.
Okay, I mean, is there any possibility that we might use outside resources? I gather that there are specialists that deal in management of leases and rent reviews and so on. Is there any possibility we might use those?
Councillor Bayford, that I don't think we should go into too much detail in this meeting, I might suggest, but I can certainly say to you that that is one of the options, and that I have done initiatives when I've been an interim director in other local authorities where there's been a similar problem. So that's one of the things that I'm in the process of discussing with Tim Willis and Madeline.
Thank you. I consider myself shut up, so thank you for that.
Not at all.
Okay. Members, I can't see any other people indicating that they want to speak. So, Councillor Duckworth, can I thank you for coming along this evening for your presentation, and Louise and Rob. And Ian, I know you're going to be doing something later, but thank you for your contribution to this agenda item. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We move on to agenda item 6, where do we have Charles, Chief Inspector Pepper here yet?
We do indeed.
Ah, excellent. Okay, right. So agenda item 6, crime stats in Thanet. So I will now call upon Chief Inspector Rhiannon Pepper to make your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you ever so much for the invite tonight. I think they've just been shared. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Chief Inspector Rhiannon Pepper. I took over as District Commander in November. Previously, I've been in and out of Thanet over my 20-year careers in various different roles. I was born and bred in Thanet, so I have a real strong affiliation to the area. And obviously, having worked in there, I know some of the unique challenges that we get from Thanet. So tonight, what I've done, I've prepared, and it's just a short overview of our crime and Asb statistics. So if we go into the first slide. So the first one is victim-based crime, obviously one of the most important ones. The good news is that actually we are slowly decreasing the trend in the volume of victim-based crime. So if you have a look, between 2018 and 2019, we had 130 crimes per 1,000 population for victim-based. We are now on 122.6 crimes per 1,000 population. You can see, and it's no surprise to anyone, we do always, during the summer periods, see a rise towards victim-based crime. And that despite the lockdown and despite having less people out and about in the public arena, we still saw that during the summer months. And we'll come on to that, but that was a lot to do with up to 10,000 people per day on the beaches. A lot of crimes that were reported that were from people that were transient coming into the area just for the day and then leaving. So if we go on to slide 2. So when we break down victim-based crime, for those of you that don't know about it, it breaks down into different crime groups. Not surprisingly, the biggest percentage is going to be violence against a person. And if you have a look, it's 51%. However, what we have seen, and again, really, really positively, is that our arson and criminal damage, we've seen a reduction. We've seen a reduction in burglary. We've seen a reduction in robbery, a reduction in sexual offences. And again, we have seen a reduction in violence against a person, although it still remains one of the biggest areas. We have, however, seen an increase in theft and theft from vehicles, and I'll come on to that. So, no, if we go back, sorry. So, taking over in November, obviously my main concern is the violence against the person. So that's what I've been concentrating on. And what we've done is every single month, we've got a violent intensification week. And that's, I've got my own resources, I've got county resources, and for an entire week, we'll be looking. And just to give you some of the highlights from that, last week we had the violent intensification week. We went to an address and it was just a caller come in saying they were concerned about a male at the address. They believed he's been cuckoo. So for those of you that don't know that terminology, it means somebody has moved into that address and taken advantage of him. We've attended, 3 people have run out and we've detained them. One of those was wanted for murder on the Mets 2 days previously and come straight down to Thanet. We found £30,000 worth of drugs and they've been charged. Also, within the intensification weeks, we've arrested outstanding sexual offenders, high-risk domestic abuse. We've done various warrants for drugs and county lines, and we've targeted our organised crime groups. So we've actively, on those weeks, we've been looking at targeting those that are causing the most high harm in our communities. Part of it as well is around the speaking to people, speaking to the youths, understanding why people would carry knives, understanding why people would think that violence is a way to deal with issues. So we've been going out doing the high visibility. Obviously, COVID has made it more difficult to do that engagement with the youth, but our youth engagement officers are still pumping those messages out, trying to get the understanding around what would happen if you're found with a knife and the impact that's going to have on you long term should you be arrested in possession of a knife. We had our amnesty bins and we had a record 74 knives recovered in January when we put them out, where people have voluntarily placed their knives away for us to recover. As part of the victim intensification week, we're actually, one of the days was domestic murder in Cliftonville. So the officers that had come on to deal with serious violence were actually dealing with that domestic murder. So that's part, and that's going to continue. We've done it every single month, a week, each single month we'll do that, and we'll really concentrate on those real high harm criminals. So we talked about everything was going down apart from theft and vehicle offences. Now, last year, Thanet had a real issue with moped thefts and theft from motor vehicles. There was 5 youths that single-handedly committed hundreds of offences, stealing mopeds, burning them, destroying them. They have all been charged and they're all going to court. In January, we started seeing a little bit of a trend as well from theft from motor vehicles. So again, using my proactive policing teams, community policing team and Margate Task Force, we looked at the areas that these crimes are being committed. We actually got some specialist assets down, our trap cars and our trap assets, and we got directed surveillance. And we located the offender, and again, he was charged and remanded to court, and we actually found out where he was selling on and who was handling all those thefts from motor vehicles. So although there was a massive jump last year, I am quite confident that when I speak to you this time next year, we're not going to see that, because any patterning now, as soon as I start seeing any patterning, I am putting the resources onto it. We talked about theft. Shoplifting has gone up across the east, in fact, across Kent. We've got town beat officers now in each town. We've got the Westwood Cross officers, and again, we work really closely with our partners. We work really closely with stores to try and target those repeat thieves in order to make sure that we deal with them. In fact, in this week alone, we've dealt with and remanded 2 prolific thieves. So it's something that we are taking seriously. Going back to the violence against a person, again, one of the things when I started looking at Thanet, started looking at the statistics, one of the problems that I found, we have quite a high rate of domestic abuse, and our call rate. So we've got 5 districts in the east. Thanet takes 28% of all calls, so our call volume is much higher than the other districts. But out of that, we actually take a higher than normal amount of domestic abuse calls. But we weren't getting the charges, and we were getting very high victim declines. So first thing I did when I arrived at Thanet was to actually look into that and say, right, why are we not seeing victim engagement? And we put a 8-point plan in, and that was all around making sure our officers now, as soon as they attend there, they will not leave until they've got a statement. Another officer will come and convey the prisoner, and we'll stay with that victim, get the statement, get the best evidence, and that has really changed our charge rate. But more important to our charge rate, it's our IP decline rate has dropped significantly because people have that confidence. We're staying with them, we're talking, we're getting that best evidence and pushing it through. So moving on to the next slide. So antisocial behaviour. Again, you can see from the graphs, we had a very high call demand in April and May. And again, having looked through that, what we didn't do was change our COVID calls. So the increase that we have includes all the COVID calls where people quite rightly are phoning us to tell us that there's a problem, that people are gathering, that people are going in and out of houses. So we saw a massive increase in April and May. We've also seen a big increase in January. Again, that is COVID calls, but we've had December and January, we've had 2 specific problems in Thanet. We've had Leopold Car Park and Arlington House. Both have received repeat calls about skateboarders and nuisance use. In November, Kent initiated the Pco Task Force, and that is a task force you can bid for a month period to come down, and they come down, group of officers, and deal with issues with you, and they do the ASARA plan, problem solve, but look at the long-term effects. So rather than just paying lip service, what are the long-term effects? So we're bidding for them for Ramsgate, and we've also, within Thanet, we've also got a PCSO proactive team. So we've got 6 PCSOs that, again, we can parachute into problem areas. So getting there on the early doors, start dealing with the issues and dealing with the underlying issues as well. So when we have nuisance use, it's okay. So obviously in lockdown while you're out, but actually what is the cause of that? What is the home life? What other things can we put in place for them? And what I can say is quite a significant drop in the calls to Arlington House. In fact, we're closing down the problem profile because we've had so few calls since we put the PCSOs in place, and the same with the Ramsgate. If we move on. So nighttime economy, it was a bit different last year, as we said, because of COVID. However, from the clustering, and it'll be no surprise to anybody that has lived or worked in Thanet, is that you're still seeing that clustering around the Ramsgate area. What I've done in anticipation for this summer and understanding what potentially could happen with the lockdown is I've looked at the shift patterns of my officers. I've changed the shift patterns of my officers to make sure I've got them at the peak periods so that we can have additional resources at that time when we know that we are going to be hit with either violence against a person or antisocial behaviour. We've got the analytical work behind it so that each week I will get a breakdown to see where the issues are, and then I can continue to look to make sure I'm putting people in that right place, as well as forward thinking. Because again, as I say, I've come from Thanet, I've worked in Thanet for many years. I can tell you the dates that we are going to see a surge. In fact, most people here can tell you the dates that we're going to see a surge because we see it every single year during the same period. So by knowing that in advance, I've already changed the shifts. I've already put additional resources on to make sure we can meet that demand as it comes through. If we go on to the next one. Next one is hate crime. So again, when I came back to Thanet, one of the problems that I saw was with the hate crime, and we were getting increased hate crime, but we weren't actually getting a lot of charges from that. Again, we're getting a lot of IP declines. So they'd call us in, tell us about their crime, but then they'd not want to prosecute. And I wanted to understand the reason behind that. And I work with the DCI, who's in charge of the overall hate crime. And we've actually put in a team now just for hate crime, because we understand the impact hate crime has on the victim. And it does have a real impact. And if we don't have the confidence of that victim, then they're not going to engage with us. They're not going to tell us about further crimes, and we're not going to be able to deal with the offenders, because what we know is in December we had one person that committed hate crimes. We need to deal with that person. We need to deal with them robustly. So we've now got a set team that looks at the hate crime, and each day I'll review it. So each day, part of my analytical products that come through, I'll look at that hate crime and I'll see what's coming overnight, make sure it's allocated, make sure that my community liaison officers updated, but most important, looking at that patterning. So have we got repeat victims? Have we got repeat offenders? What can I do to try and reassure the community that we are taking this seriously? Next slide. A stop and search. I think this is an incredible tool and one that we must use, but we must use wisely. So within our stop and search, our independent police advisory group, which we have within Thanet, we will talk about our stop search, and we'll give an example of a stop search, and we'll take it from start to finish, and we'll talk with the independent group about what they think we should have done, what they think we did right, what they think we did wrong, and then we share that. But that's also done within the county as well. So our stop searches will go to the county IPAG as well. And again, you'll have laypersons that will look, and they'll look at the body worn, they'll look at how the officers interacted, did they use correct terminology, did they have the lawful power to do it? And so each stop and search is scrutinised. Each stop and search we carried out has to be authorised by the person's supervisor, and they have to outline the grounds and the reasons and what was found. Majority of our stop searches, as you can see, are done for misuse of drugs. In fact, the vast majority of our stop search is done for misuse of drugs. We have the PACE, and that is normally going to be your weapons. So we're stopping you because we believe that you've got a weapon upon you, and we'll go on to weapons next. But the vast majority of stop searches within Thanet are because of drugs, where we believe that person has drugs on them. What I wanted to do here is just reassure people that there is scrutiny over our stop search. There is scrutiny not only with the independent police but internally as well. So each month I will dip test for these stop searches and make sure that I am happy with the circumstances, I'm happy with the body worn video, I'm happy that the officers have done everything within their power and that is lawful. So the last slide is around knife crime. As you can see, we had a big jump in December with knife crime, and that was actually youth on youth crime. And that was youth being asked to come and meet a drug dealer to buy drugs. And as they turned up, the drug dealer would then turn a knife on them and they take their money. Again, working with our youth groups, working with our PCSOs, we got that messaging out there. And we actually, again, were very fortunate to locate and arrest a couple of people that were dealing with those robberies. However, although that looks quite high, what I need to say is that we've changed the recording system as well. So if you reported a crime to me and you said, I saw a knife in their hand, that would be recorded as a knife incident, even if it later transpires there wasn't a knife in their hand. Criminal damages, if a sharp instrument is used to damage a vehicle, that is recorded as a knife crime. So the statistics don't really reflect our actual knife crime. And each week we have a performance meeting and we go through the knife crime in Thanet, and we'll break down knife crime actually where a knife has been used, and then knife crime where a knife has been mentioned, not seen, and other incidents, i.e. the criminal damages where something sharp has been used. The attention on knife crime, again, I look at it, I pass it out to my inspectors. I want an update. Anybody that's found with a knife, anybody that uses a knife, I'll expect an update the next day about what's happened with them. If they've been released under investigation, then why that was, why we haven't put bail conditions on them. If they've been released without charge, then that's a full report to me, so that I am satisfied that those that are carrying knives, and again at a risk to themselves and to others, we are dealing with appropriately. I appreciate that was a whistle top. I can't even speak now. I appreciate that was a quick run through statistics, and I'll open it up to questions.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. Really, really interesting. Somebody who's not actually in the meeting has come up on the sidebar and asked whether it would be possible, when you're going into a place, one of your targeted days, if ward councillors could be advised that it's happening and what you're targeting as you're going in. Would that be possible?
I could do it after the days, but obviously, as I'm sure you can appreciate, a lot of ours is sensitive information, especially when we're talking about the organised crime and we're talking about the drug dealing.
Of
so
course.
I wouldn't necessarily say prior to doing it, but what we could do is, as part of our debrief at the end of the week, is actually put it out to the councillors to say we've been on this address, without the address, we've been on this location and this is what we've found. So I could easily incorporate that as part of our debriefing system, if that would be useful for people.
Lovely, I'm sure it would. Thank you. Councillor Boyd.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. It was just a quick question, as we are now in very much a virtual world, using our computers a lot more, as to whether there's any work around collecting the data about if there's any changes on sort of online crime. And when I say online crime, as in anything from scams, grooming, puppies being missold, all of that kind of stuff. So I wondered whether there was anything specific to Thanet amongst it. I know that's probably quite difficult, but whether there's any kind of data, have we seen an increase in it, and also how can we keep obviously our residents safe along that front?
I haven't seen an increase per se. Obviously, we put out via Neighbourhood Watch, we put out via Twitter and via Facebook around, recently we had the COVID, where people were being asked for their details for COVID. So whenever we get anything, we do try and put it out across the open media to make people aware. But again, that is a good point. I've not seen, and I am a slave, just me, to my analytical work every day. I've not seen any patterning, but if there was patterning, as well as putting out Neighbourhood Watch, I could quite easily, I'll get a list of all the councillors and make sure that the councillors are aware as well. So if we see, and we've had it previously, where people have been knocking at the doors offering to do services to vulnerable victims, if we see that drawn a specific area, as well as putting it out towards Thanet, we can specifically give it to the councillor so that they can warn their persons.
Brilliant, thank you. And just in terms of any proactive materials to particularly safeguard obviously children and young people, you mentioned cocooing, which is very much a physical thing, but again using online and web chat to hook up. So if there's anything that we can use to promote, to keep obviously our younger residents safe so they don't fall into county lines, as well as the other element of potential grooming as well, like in the news today about Google and stuff like that. So I just wonder if there's any other materials we can potentially use and promote on our socials to parents and schools and things like that.
Do you know there is, and again I can get that and I can get that sent out, but also fortunately we're going back in schools, so police are going back in schools. It was a real shame when we came out of it, and we are going back in schools, and part of that will be looking at child sexual exploitation, making people aware of the dangers, but certainly we do have some products that I can send out.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Roper.
Hi, yes, thank you for your presentation. It's always a bit alarming seeing statistics like that, but thank you anyway. Couple of questions. My ward is for the Thanet villages, and you didn't give any statistics for the Thanet villages, and I am aware that there's probably virtually no crime in the area, but do you gather statistics on the Thanet villages? And secondly, on the domestic violence, you've got the crimes against people, or the victim crime, but I wonder if you keep separate, or whether we could be presented with the breakdown of the statistics for domestic crime, domestic violence, because I suspect the media have been red hot on the fact that it's probably been increasing. Okay, thank you.
Okay, with regards to the villages, yes, we do, and I'm aware my PCSOs come to the village parish councils and they present on the crimes that have happened. As you say, there are quite low numbers. If I was to put every single ward in there, I think it would probably take us too long. And so what I've done is done the main wards where we have the biggest issues, but certainly within Thanet villages, I know we collect the data and that we do give that data back on a regular meeting basis. Regarding the breakdown of domestic abuse, I can do that. We have victim-based crime, so we put it all in towards victim-based crime, but what we do is separate that towards domestic abuse and the other violence against a person. So again, that's something that if you'd like me to come back and present on, I could easily do that, and then I can talk through what we're doing around trying to safeguard domestic abuse victims.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just to say, when I attend the parish council meetings, and yes, the PCSOs do give us a breakdown of the crime. As you said, none of it is very serious. It's usually a little minor theft or something. But thank you anyway. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Scott.
Good evening. Yeah, many thanks for the presentation. It's always good to sort of get a broad idea on the numbers. One of the key things that I always wanted to do prior to the lockdown was sort of engage with our PCSO, sort of have a walkthrough of that particular person. I think it was a Jake or a Jack Angel at the time. I always get his name wrong, so I apologise on that. But what I did want to try and do is have that sort of walk around in my ward. I represent the Westgate ward. I mean, obviously, with the lockdown being what it is and COVID, when can that sort of situation be looked into, if that it can be arranged? Also, just something that Councillor Roper pointed out is we don't actually get a report for our sort of parish meetings regarding PCSO, so that'd be very welcome. The other thing, which is a bit of a question, was one of the things that you pointed out was sort of stop and search with especially drug-related misuse. Westgate has been sort of a notorious point where Margate is normally the place where sort of the dealers from Londoners would often have come down to actually deal within the actual district of Thanet. It's been sort of in the past couple of years now been seen as Westgate is the place that they would get off. It's quite a quiet station. It allows them, these particular dealers, to use their bikes and then distribute within the Thanet area. So I just didn't know if that is still, I think there was a task force. I know you give them very entertaining names, so I don't know what it was called. I just didn't know if that's still been undertaken, because I think that still might be the case where you're probably finding a footfall of these dealers using sort of Westgate, the quieter stations such as Birchton as the port of call. So I didn't know if there was a bit of an uptake on that. Thank you.
So regarding your first point, I would actually really encourage, obviously not during this period, but once COVID has lifted and restrictions have changed, for people to come out with their local either PCSO or town beat officer, depending on what ward you are. I do really encourage that, and when we can, I encourage people to come on drive-alongs, come out with the local policing teams to actually understand some of the challenges of the policing and get a feel as they're going through for some of the issues that are faced by the residents within Thanet. So I'll definitely encourage that for everybody. Regarding the train stations, as part of the intensification week, we work with BTP and we do go to the different stations to target them, because again, we know as soon as you show a police presence at Margate, they'll start coming off at the other stations. We also know, as you said, that the quieter stations, especially when the schools are in, so if you're looking at Westgate, when you've got the two main schools there, that is a key point for people to jump out and start trying to sell drugs. So it's very much on our radar, and we do have various different task force, as you said, with all different names, dealing with our key areas.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and when we do sort of come out of this lockdown, I'll be very much interested in the ride-alongs, and obviously it can assist the police in any way. So thank you, and keep up the good work.
Councillor Curry.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, thanks for your presentation. I'm a ward councillor in Cliftonville West, and we found the Margate Task Force multi-agency visits really useful and really sort of helpful. I was wondering, are there any plans sort of later in the year, obviously, you know, post lockdown, for these visits to begin again? Thank you.
Funny enough, I'm actually sat in the office with Penny, and we were discussing this earlier, saying obviously at the moment, because of the restrictions, it's making it quite difficult, but moving forward they have a real impact. Having all the different agencies there that can deal with all the different problems that emerge is really, really useful. So it's definitely something we'll be doing taking forward.
Okay, members, I can't see anybody else wanting to speak. So can I just thank you very much for coming along this evening, giving up your time to be here, and wonder if you'd be prepared to come back in a not too distant future and give us a bit of an update. And perhaps something that we've had in previous presentations is sort of some comparisons between Thanet and other places in Kent, the differences between them in terms of crime, and perhaps some idea of why that might be and anything that can be done about that. So there's a challenge. Would you be prepared to pick it up and run with it?
Absolutely, I cannot say no to any challenges. So no, absolutely, more than happy to come back and talk about it. And whatever you want to know about, just let me know in advance, and I can make sure that my presentation reflects that.
That's fantastic. So on behalf of the panel, can I thank you very much for coming along tonight? Thank you. Members, moving on. Agenda item 7, Foreshore and Coastal Public Spaces Protection Order. Jasmine, you're on again. I think you're going to be covering a lot of the stuff that was in the members' briefing the other night. So if you want to sort of gallop through it fairly quickly, I think most of us are familiar with the content. That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm just going to present, and yes, I'm not going to present the whole presentation that I did at members' briefing. I'm going to summarise it, and I'm going to give members a bit of an overview of some of the feedback from the consultation that we've had so far, which I think might be useful and informative, hopefully.
Probably.
So you should all be able to see slides now. Okay, so just to briefly introduce it to everyone, we are proposing to introduce a new beach and coast public spaces protection order and a coastal code of conduct. So previously we had bylaws, and this will replace those old bylaws. So the intention and the reason why we want to do this is obviously to create a safer beach environment for everyone, for our residents, but also for our visitors and our staff and officers as well, through deterring and reducing antisocial behaviour, but also lots of other undesirable activities which we get an awful lot of complaints about in the summer season. So as with the dog PSPO, it's valid for 3 years, after which point we would look to extend it or do something different or change and amend it. And the fixed penalty notices that we can issue under this legislation are currently set at £100, same for dogs, and so we're keeping that consistent. So over the recent years, I think the complaints around problems with usage around our coastline have increased, and this is probably as a result of having lots more visitors to our coastline, which is fantastic, but it also comes with another set of problems. So having a separate code of conduct as well will really help us address some of the issues, and hopefully, help out our local businesses as well who are working along the coastline. So obviously the main justification for PSPO is around antisocial behaviours. So all of the things that we have included in here can be linked to some form of antisocial behaviour, or they affect people's enjoyment of their home or the coastline and the natural environment. Interestingly, most of the content hasn't changed from our old bylaws. We might have reworded it and made it a bit clearer and brought it up to date because the wording of the bylaws was quite antiquated, but fundamentally there are very few changes. Some of the key changes we are making or proposing to make are around the water user group rules and PWC usage. And most of the time when we talk about PWCs, we're referring to jet skis because they're the most common things that we see around our coastline. But it does cover all PWCs, not just jet skis. So the focus that we are going with this PSPO is not that we are going to be really draconian and hand out lots of fixed penalty notices. This is a new set of rules that we're bringing in for people, and it wouldn't be reasonable to dish out lots of tickets and not do a lot of education and informative work as well. So the key points that we're focusing in on are making sure that the rules of the coast are really clear, because that's something that's missing at the moment, I feel. So we do have a lot of rules and expectations for coastal users, and usually there's a really good justification behind those, often to keep people safe, but we need to make sure that everyone understands it. The next thing is telling people what we expect from them, but also what they can expect from us. So making sure that we are putting out posters, signs, social media, and lots of other creative methods to make sure that people can access the information. And that's easier for our residents, but less easy for visitors. So we need to look at a whole raft of different communications methods, which we're capturing within a communications plan. And we're trying to use things like QR codes, because obviously since COVID, people are much more familiar with using things like that, as well as traditional methods of communications, obviously. Being present and visible is the other key issue that we need to address. So obviously having lots of patrols going around, so TDC officers, but also utilising our other existing staff and partners, making sure that we're all giving out the same messages and we're all telling people the same thing. So consultation feedback to date, the consultation is still running at the moment. So obviously we're expecting to have a few more responses in. We have had largely positive response with regards to our changes to jet ski and where they can launch from, and the rules that we are setting to bring in around those. Canterbury are also embarking on some changes to jet ski usage in their district. So it's all coming together in quite a timely fashion. We do work with the other neighbouring councils as well as part of the coastal safety partnership. So we are doing lots of other things to look at how we can link up around the East Kent coast. The barbecue proposals as well is the other key fundamental change of the rules, and that's been welcomed as well. So the change is proposing that we unify the rules around barbecues across our beaches and bays. So you can't barbecue anywhere until after 6 p.m. So clarity has been asked, and a lot of our feedback has been around people haven't quite grasped maybe the full detail of the rules, and they're asking for clarification on that. So again, it's around things like electric bikes. We're not banning electric bikes at all. We're just issuing people with some separate guidelines around how to use them safely. And so some of these things are going to be captured within a follow-up document after the consultation, which will answer some of these questions, and we'll do some FAQs and clarification so people are aware that we've listened to what they're saying through the consultation. One of the other things that came out of members' briefing the other evening is some questions around the Foreness Water Ski Club, and I've had a good discussion with Councillor Moore about this, really productive. And again, there's some really easy things that we can do there moving forward to clarify what goes on at that club and how we work to support them. And then we've also looked at something this week that's come up, which is around obstructions on our promenades, and that could cover a whole multitude of things, but it could be tables and chairs that are out in the wrong place and they're causing obstruction, which is then leading to people having to dismount when they don't need to, and lots of issues around obstructions to the prom. So that's something that we're looking to include in one of the sections. So feedback from members after the briefing and during the briefing on Tuesday were really useful. Targeted enforcement operations was one of the suggestions, and I think that's a really good idea. So where we've got a hotspot, for example, such as Barnes Car Park, we've got a lot of jet ski launching that goes on there. So that would be an example of a place that we could target some action at. And then monitoring, obviously, of the enforcement activities and the softer interventions will take place, but one of the members suggested that we publicise those and share it as a kind of news story. So I think that's really important as well, to show the public that we're making progress with this and it's having an impact. Mobile CCTV was another thing that was raised, which we can absolutely do to help deal with those things mentioned previously. Arrangements at the Faunus Club I've mentioned, and some of the other things that came out of discussion were about things like marker buoys and bins, and the situation with parking at Botany Bay, and a whole load of other really operational issues, which are linked to the PSPO, but we're capturing all of those things separately in our beach management plan for the season. So that will probably be a separate member briefing at a later date, but we will give people a bit more information on all the other stuff that isn't exactly specific to the PSPO. So some of the potential questions that members tonight might be interested to ask, and these are based on some government guidance around, you know, what members can ask around PSPOs being brought in. So I'll just run through these really briefly, and then I will hand over to members for any other questions. So the first one is around evidence that the antisocial behaviour or the issues are unreasonable. So what we've done with this particular PSPO is we've asked all the officers involved to collate information and evidence, and we've got lots and lots of emails from over the years, and last year in particular, which we're keeping filed and ready to explain our justification for all of the items that are in there. And one of the questions that we have been asked is why a PSPO and why not, you know, look at some other way of addressing the problems. The issue with the bylaws was partly the process for dealing with people who breach them was much more lengthy legal process. The ability to issue a fixed penalty notice is a swifter way of dealing with a persistent problem. But also the general ethos around PSPO being linked to antisocial behaviour and people's enjoyment of the coastal environment or their home really seems to fit for the type of issues that we have around the Thanet coast. So again, we are looking at not doing, you know, disproportionate issuing of fines to people. We're looking really at educating, informing, and then challenging behaviours, and then resorting to fixed penalty notices when we absolutely have to, when the you know, the people aren't compliant with what we're asking them to do. And we have the teeth to be able to issue those through bringing this PSPO in. Alternative approaches. So again, other councils will stay with the bylaw approach because they want to include more things in their set of rules. But we feel that PSPO for Thanet is the right tool moving forward. And we have it for other things already. So it seems to be more consistent with things like the dog PSPO and our alcohol related antisocial behaviour PSPO as well. Will the proposals alleviate each of the problem behaviours? We expect this to have a significant impact through the promotion of it being a new set of rules and a new thing that we're bringing in. And we think that alone will have some impact on improving situations and issues around the coast. But again, the combination of really targeted education and challenge of behaviour, we think will really help to alleviate most of the problems in here. Exemptions, so people that might be exempt from it, as with the dog PSPO, all of those things are captured within our equality impact assessment. We have considered those for specific issues. And in terms of unintended consequences, I think displacement of behaviours is probably the biggest thing that we could really pick up on that might be an unintended consequence. We do have the option to amend the PSPO within the 3-year period. So if something did come up that was a huge issue that hadn't been, you know, picked up on, we have the ability to do something about that. Impact on different groups. The main group impacted by this will be the water user group, but very specific members of the water user group. And outside of that, there will be fairly little change on people that are already using the coastline responsibly. This is about dealing with problem behaviours and antisocial behaviour. So last few questions that we've sort of tried to cover off are consultation outcomes and other evidence. We're collating it all as we go, and we're trying to respond to people as we go and address certain issues. And just kind of allay any fears that might come up. We've had a couple of people asking, you know, does this mean we can no longer use a particular location for a particular activity? And we're saying, no, not necessarily. There are certain caveats within the PSPO for activities like events or filming activities or organised clubs and groups who have the right risk assessments and insurances in place to make sure everything's done safely. So again, it's not necessarily black and white. There are ways that we can work with local groups and local people to find ways around some of the issues. How will it be enforced? So this was the biggest question that people have really asked us, and how are you going to resource it? So these final two questions. We will have a designated officer who will be working this season, and this is a trial. We'll see how we get on with this post. It will sit within the enforcement team. They will be focused on the beach and coast, PSPO only, just that, and just coastal issues. However, they will have the backup of our dog warden. And our dog warden will be focused on the coast this summer because that's where our biggest area of need. Not to say they won't get called off to other places from time to time, but their focus is going to be on patrolling the coast. And that's in response to feedback that people want to see, you know, the dog warden out there and, you know, encouraging people to do the right thing and use the right locations for exercising their dogs and dealing with dog fouling, which is the other big problem we have. But we will also have our education enforcement officer who will be out there as well, and both she and the dog warden will be able to enforce under this PSPO. So that's 3 officers. We're currently exploring our civil enforcement officers and how they might be able to enforce the PSPO as well as their parking responsibilities, because we recognise that a lot of the time, especially in the summer when they're focused on coastal car parks, they're out there and they will witness other activities taking place that they could deal with. And then we are also expecting that due to COVID's situation continuing and encouraging recovery of local businesses and supporting the public through the COVID recovery, that we will have COVID wardens out and about. And again, that their presence will be focused around the coastline because it's where our biggest issues with social distancing and non-compliance will be. And so they will be able to issue out advice and guidance and challenge behaviours in relation to this PSPO as well. So our general intention is to have a lot more visible presence around the coast this season. So that's pretty much all of it. I'm not going to go through the whole presentation that I went through on Tuesday night. So I will stop now and take any questions from members.
Yeah, Jasmine, thank you very much for that. I've got to say, I think this is probably a first. I think you're the first person that's brought their own scrutiny questions along with them. And I hope that you've set a precedent, because that'll make life so much easier for us going forward. So thank you for that. Councillor Moore, you wish to speak. Can I just say, if it's very specifically about fairness, again, perhaps that ought to be dealt with outside this meeting.
No, Chair. It was firstly to thank Jasmine for her presentation and also for the conversations that we've had since the Tuesday meeting. And I was pleasing to see that some of the comments that we've already raised in the briefing and on the telephone are actually in your slide presentation. So it shows that you've taken on board what we're trying to get over. And it was just to reaffirm our support in helping and working with you for this, because I think it's a very worthwhile thing to be doing for our coastline. And just a quick update, I have spoken to Fourness on your behalf, as I said I would, and they are keen to get in contact and liaise with you. And they're keen to, as you've mentioned, they're keen to find out the expectations, the clarity. They want some safeguarding for themselves and with the way things happen when they are on the water, as you've mentioned in the slides. And they're also keen to support both you and the council in areas of policing this as well. And I believe they've got a few ideas and suggestions, also bringing on board the Coast Guard and the RNI. And also there are official courses that you can do, like the Royal Yachting Association, but they're very expensive. But they are looking to create their own formatted qualification that you have to get before you can even become a member of the Water User Group. And they also want to consider putting a rib out for safety on the sea as well, to be more proactive. So there's lots of good things that these clubs wish to do, and it's nice to see that, but they just want to get in contact with you. So if you can get in contact with them, I think this will move forward and it will become a very robust and worthwhile document. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moore, for not being specific. That's great. Councillor Roper.
Okay, hi Jasmine, nice to see you again. Thank you again for the update. I have a particular interest in Pegwell Bay because being a site of special scientific interest, I wondered if it receives any particular attention or any funding, for instance, because it's a more sensitive area. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roper. Yes, so obviously working with some of our officers like Thanet Coast Project Officer and our SAMS officer and various other people who are looking at some of the conservation side of things, we are aware that we do need to focus in some attention at Pegwell, and we've got some issues there where there is some misuse probably going on, I think it's fair to say, and there's been some really interesting film footage that's been published online recently, which was quite concerning. So yes, I think in short, we're looking at trying to capture some of the issues there with some of the other agencies, external agencies that are concerned with the location, and trying to focus in on them. So the dog PSPO covers some of it, but I think again it's down to presence and having that presence there more frequently. So that is certainly something we're looking at. Yes, so hopefully that answers your question.
And does it have any funding, specific funding for that?
So through the Thanet Coast project, obviously there is particular focus on that area and the National Nature Reserve, and obviously we have other designations in the locality there like Ramsar and other important international designations. In terms of specific funding for that bay, I'm not sure actually, so that's something I'll have to find out from Tony Child, but that's certainly something to look into, and if we don't, then maybe there's some things we can look at there, because one of the key things there is around signage and informing people about what we expect from them, because I suspect that's a large part of the problem, is people aren't really sure what they should and shouldn't be doing there.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Huxley.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jasmine, for your presentation again. Just to say, we've had a lot of contact with residents who use the beach at Ramsgate Main Sands, mostly from East Cliff Ward and Moses Montefiore Ward. And they say when they swim on the beach there, or they did last summer, the kite surfers were quite dangerous and there was no sort of, management of the beach. How are you going to enforce that? Is that going to be in the beach management plan rather than the PSPO? Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, we do have some things planned for Ramsgate Main Sands. One of them is putting in a buoyed bathing area, which we hope will provide some protection for swimmers over and above what we already have. And we're looking at this at a few locations, not just Ramsgate Main Sands. Part of that is to add that extra layer of protection against any watercraft that kind of do accidentally come into the bathing area. Obviously, we also have the RNLI who are looking after those beaches in the season as well. Our enforcement officers will be looking at dealing with some of the really specific water-based activities, but I think again a lot of it is around code of conduct, so they're going to have to be stopping people, challenging them and reminding them of what they need to be doing. There are some challenges to that, obviously, when they're out in the water, and it's about catching them when they come back in. If they're launching from our beaches, then we can absolutely deal with that, yes.
Thank you. Councillor Boyd.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you again for your presentation, Jasmine. Just a comment really in terms of, I'm really pleased you've mentioned about obstructions within the proms. The other thing which could be, I classify it sometimes as an obstruction, is actually people. So just more around how can we promote more courtesy around how we use the proms, so we're not getting lines of 6 people going along, because I know in various other briefings we've had complaints about cyclists going too fast or not being out of the way, and I think there's a lack of an understanding within the walkers, the runners, the cyclists as to which side they're meant to be on, you know, and it causes that kind of friction. Obviously you can't tell people what to do, but in terms of, is there any signs about just being courteous of other people, whether it's trying to keep to the left or whatever. And the other comment was, I really like the idea of the training. So obviously with the AQA, the training, and I just wondered whether within part of that you could have almost like a physical action within that. So whether it's they go out with a lift stick and they go and do a bit of a beach clean as part of it, because then they might actually feel a bit more invested to not do it again, because they've had to just go and work a little bit to help that community. Obviously it doesn't have to be a Thanet one, because you don't want to be known as, I don't know, community payback 1.0 or something, but you can get other charities or people involved and just kind of make it a bit more worthwhile for them to do it.
Yes, part of the AQA course for littering, I believe, is spent out physically outside doing a litter pick. So that is already proposed as part of it. So yes, and generally using it as an opportunity to connect people with the natural environment, which is part of changing their behaviour in the longer term. So yes, absolutely. And the thing about shared space around the proms, we have got a project ongoing at the moment with KCC where we've got those, we had stickers on the proms and they're all being replaced and redesigned, but I do think that there's a bit of extra work there around what you say about actually pedestrians being, you know, careful of cyclists as well. And it's a bit of a, you know, a two-pronged thing really. It's not always just on cyclists all the time being irresponsible and going too fast. So yeah, we have got this code of conduct and there's a whole, you know, load of extra stuff in that, but I think we could probably highlight that within there around being sort of courteous.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bailey, and my apologies, you asked to speak under 20.1. I should have brought you in at the beginning, so I do apologise for that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thanks, Jasmine, for your presentation again, really useful and really positive initiative this. You've actually answered a lot of the questions or covered a lot of the things I was going to say, so thank you for that. Thank you for taking on board the suggestions from the briefing the other night, especially around targeted campaigns and publicising data and whatever. A couple of specific questions regarding the barbecues under condition 2. It says about removing them from the beach and not putting them in the beach bins. Will TDC be providing special barbecue bins for the beaches? That's one thing. What was the other question? Oh, regarding vehicles on proms. Again, would it be possible to have pop-up barriers at the entrances to prevent unauthorised vehicles? Because we have a lot of problems with this in Broadstairs on the prom, a lot of vehicles coming on the prom. And my main worry, as the other night, is still about the evening activities on the beaches with the bonfires, drug taking, drinks, large gatherings. How are we going to enforce that if it's outside of the enforcement officer's working hours? So they're my questions. Thank you.
So first one is a fairly easy one about barbecue bins for the beaches. So this is something we've been talking about, I think, for quite a few years. And whilst we do want to encourage people to take stuff home with them where they possibly can, obviously once it's cooled down, but I do think it's something that we do need to pursue in getting at some of our locations where we do get a lot of people barbecuing. So that's something that that we can definitely look into. I'm not sure where we ever got to it with it in the past, so I need to revisit that. Vehicles on proms, we did have pop-up barriers that we used at a couple of locations last year to slow people down and to stop vehicles, and one of them was at West Bay. They weren't necessarily the most attractive looking things, but they did serve a purpose. So they're a bit like a concertina, so you can kind of pull them out. And the bay inspectors had those, they looked after them and they put them out at the bay when needed. So that's a really quick and easy way of us doing something, you know, just within the season. But we have put a couple of extra bollards in over the winter in various places. So again, if that's something that's more appropriate because we want to permanently restrict access somewhere, then we can potentially look at doing that where it's not going to obstruct, you know, people getting around where they need to. So that the pop-up barriers is probably the easiest way of resolving that. So we can speak to Your Leisure about that and see if that's something that they can do again this year. Did you say Broadstairs was probably the place for that?
Yes, there's a lot of we have a lot of problems with vehicles on the prom at Broadstairs. Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. So we can,
that's the upper prom at the top of the cliff. Yeah.
And the final thing is about the seasonal out of hours issues with parties. So again, that's something that a lot of the time the police will get called to. But what we are going to try and do again this year as part of the beach management plan is a multi-agency meeting, and have that sort of our responses to particular issues mapped out ahead of the season. So we're not coming into the season and trying to address it, you know, in July and August when we're in the midst of all these things happening. So just trying to be a bit more organised really. And I think some of those things will be joint ops between us and the police, that we'll be trying to map out ways that we can just, you know, target hotspot areas again, really.
And the other thing associated with that is communicating our worries, you know, if things are going on. Do we call the police in the first instance in that case, if there's things going on in the beach, antisocial behaviour at night?
I think if it was at night, I think that probably would be. I think most of the work that we would be looking to do would be other kind of slow time, more proactive joint initiatives. But we do need to agree on a mechanism by which members can let us know quickly about issues. So we still need to determine what that looks like, but we do know that's something we need to do. So that is on the list, yeah.
That's great, thank you.
Okay, Jasmine, a couple of councillors in the chat have asked whether there'll be a dedicated number that councillors can have so they can quickly contact coast and street scene officers and get enforcement action.
Yes. So again, we haven't quite determined who and what that will be and how that will look, and if we have some kind of shared, you know, phone for an on-duty officer or something. But it is something we're looking to try and find a way around so that members do have a quick way in to contact us.
Thank you. I can't see any other members wishing to comment. Jasmine, can I thank you very much for presentation tonight? You know, very clear, very comprehensive. Thank you for thinking up questions that we probably wouldn't have thought of. That was really good. And you know, it's good to note that from the briefing the other night and from comments that members have made tonight that you're taking those on board and that they'll be fed into the system. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, we just note the report. Thank you. Agenda item 8. Jasmine, you're back again. Report on the council's abandoned vehicle process. How can TDC speed up time taken to clear abandoned vehicles? Over to you.
Thank you. I'm not going to present for this one. I'm just going to read through the report. So obviously the question has been asked about how we can speed up the process. So at the moment, the process that we have within the parking and enforcement team is set based on legislation, and I think there's a lot of connected issues with this that sometimes get a bit confused. So part of one of the actions that we're proposing is actually we do a bit more communication around this to clarify what the public need to do to report and what we can do to deal with some of the issues. So as I've said in the report, obviously abandoned vehicles often get confused with nuisance vehicles, and the two things can kind of get a bit muddled. A nuisance vehicle, you know, could be any number of things depending on a person's perception, really. But commonly, some of the things we get asked about are vehicles that are poorly parked for amounts of time. Obviously, those that cause obstruction, resident disputes, things that have broken down places and have been left there, and those which are untaxed. So the thing about abandoned vehicles is they are costly to remove, but we do recognise that they are negative in terms of the perception that they create of a local environment. And a lot of the time, some of the actions that we look at doing are obviously cleaning up locations to try and help reduce the impact of crime and antisocial behaviour. There are also physical risks to some of these vehicles being left there. So again, we recognise that some of them, which are dangerous, cause extra concern, and we do have different ways of dealing with them more quickly. So we do have the main piece of legislation that we use is obviously this one that's listed here, which is the Refuse Disposal Act 1978, and we are able to remove abandoned vehicles on public land as part of that. There are other pieces of legislation that we can remove vehicles abandoned on private land. So under this act, abandoning a vehicle is a criminal offence, and we can deal with that through fines and obviously prosecution as well. So the main thing, and I think this is probably one of the key things about the issue that we have here in the process and how long it takes, is when people report an abandoned vehicle, sometimes it doesn't always meet the criteria. So it has to not be taxed, been in situ for over 2 weeks, and doesn't have a known owner. And then that will then lead on to the type of action that we might take. So obviously for something that's dangerous, burnt out, leaking, or there's other really obvious health hazards and health and safety hazards, then we've got that 24-hour notice which we can issue. The 7-day notice is the thing that's probably the more common one that we would use, and then the 15-day notice. For that, if it's on private land, that's where we would need to work closely with a landowner, and sometimes that's where things can get a bit complicated and maybe take a bit longer. So all of these things are set by legislation, so they're quite prescriptive. And in terms of how quickly we have to wait between issuing notices and giving people the chance to respond to those notices and claim their vehicle or move it, they're set very strictly and can't be changed. So the process that we've listed out here is obviously that at the moment, reports are made online by members of the public, or emails or telephone calls through to us on our system, which get noted by our officers. And then 7 days after that report, an officer will attend and put a notice physically onto the vehicle, and that gives the legal notice of the intent of removal if someone doesn't come forward in that time. And then we would request from the DVLA the details of the registered keeper. And we have had some delays with this recently, which I think are as a result of COVID related issues and administrative and resource issues at the DVLA side potentially. There's been a few blips in the system and how it would normally work. But generally speaking, that's pretty instantaneous that we can get that information. And then obviously if there is a registered keeper, then we would write to them to advise them what we're going to do. And then that gives them a time period to claim the vehicle. After that time period of 7 days has gone, then we will send one of our officers out to visit again a second time to make sure it's still there. And then we can basically press ahead with getting it removed. We use a contractor to do this. And again, this is the only other sort of section of the process where there might be a delay, is if they couldn't respond immediately or within a reasonable time frame, for example. And then if a vehicle is claimed during the process, then there's obviously no further action that we would be able to take. So the police do have some powers as well. And they are obviously able to act a bit more swiftly under the powers that they have. And then the timescales, as I said, are set out under the legislation. So there isn't really any clear way that we could speed up the process at this time, other than to make the process clearer for residents and make sure that when they do report an abandoned vehicle, that report doesn't come through to us, and they need to get a response, I think, a bit more quickly to say if it isn't deemed to be abandoned, so that they're not waiting for a process to start that actually isn't going to be able to be applicable in the circumstances. So I think really our recommendation is that this is noted, the process is noted, but also that we will endeavour to update our website with a bit more useful information, I think, for the public around the process.
Okay. Jasmine, thank you. The recommendation is that this report is noted and that communications could be strengthened on the council's process to inform residents of the procedures and timescales we are confined to under the legislation. I think if that was done, that would make a vast improvement. I can't see any members wishing to speak. No, nobody's speaking. So, Jasmine, I think this is you finished for the night at last. Can I thank you once again? I mean, the report was really clear, and can't thank you enough for all you've done tonight. It's been the Jasmine Vickers show, and a good show it's been. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, agenda item 8, planning enforcement review. Why is the planning enforcement process seemingly so slow in Thanet, and how can it be made more efficient? I will call upon Deb Shotton if she's here, member of the public who wishes to speak.
I do. Can you hear me?
I certainly can.
This is
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. And starting now. I did planning at university, so it's an area of interest of mine, most particularly the sort of philosophy of enforcement and how it can impact communities beneficially. This is something we've been hearing from with Jasmine and with the police this evening. Maintaining safe and pleasant environments for everybody. I believe that community engagement in planning matters impacts hugely on a local authority's ability to protect and enhance the lived environment of their constituents, or amenity in planning parlance. In turn, an environment in which its inhabitants believe they have some say in how it is managed becomes their environment, which they will be more inclined to protect and conserve in their turn. For those of you unfamiliar with the broken windows theory, the basic principle is that where visible signs of criminal damage in an environment, such as broken windows, are left unrepaired, there is a strong inclination for those in that environment to perceive the crime as okay, and for that level of criminal behaviour to become unacceptable and thus accepted and even permitted. This theory was adopted by, dare I say, Rudy Giuliani when he was mayor of New York in the 90s, and it eventually slipped sideways into a controversial zero-tolerance policing policy, but not before it had been proven in its purest environmental form to positively affect crime figures in communities. Run-down neighbourhoods breed criminal behaviour, and even littering, as we all know, which I've always seen as the first community insult which kids learn, will affect perception of their environment. Where there is litter, people will drop more. In the same way, poorly enforced planning laws engender badly behaved developers, where dodging planning requirements and environmental obligations becomes acceptable. I'm under no illusion as regards the difficulties facing local authorities charged with enforcement when insufficient funds are available. However, not enforcing in the first instance is far more expensive in the long term. We have the conundrum where if you can't afford to enforce, then you certainly can't afford not to enforce. I believe the council must look up from current finances and towards the future, where greater costs await you, rectifying greater wrongs. Importantly, enforcement should be regarded as an income stream. At its best, efficiently and proactively managed, it should be self-funding. It is also increasingly vital for local authorities to keep a tight hold on their development responsibilities with Robert Jenrick's zoning planning reforms and the National Infrastructure Commission's tendency to sideline local planning input, increasingly favouring developers' commercial requirements over the well-being of the environments affected. I hope TDC can work across party lines to ensure that enforcement is used effectively for the good of both the council and the people it serves. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shotton. Thank you very much. Ian Livingston.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to present my screen. I was just going to go through the report. So thank you very much for inviting me to the Overview Scrutiny Panel. Just to run through what the report covers. It covers some of the background to the legislation with regards to planning enforcement, back to the Planning Act, and then throughout national guidance in terms of what constitutes effective enforcement action and why it is so important, as we've just heard, about upholding the principles of public amenity and also the support for the planning system and the very foundations of the built environment, as well as the natural environment. The planning enforcement process at Thanet is a complaints-based service. We operate to balance the resources that we have in line with public expectation. And the report does talk about how planning enforcement is often a very emotive topic because of sometimes the nature of those breaches are very significant and really do affect people's lives. Therefore, we categorize complaints linked to our enforcement protocol, which was appended to the report, on a prioritization basis, looking at high priority cases, which encompasses issues to do with unauthorized works to listed buildings, unauthorized works in conservation areas, unauthorized works that affect people's living conditions, breaches of Section 106 agreements, as well as works to protected trees without consent, as well as potentially visually prominent development. And then there are low priority cases which involve more minor breaches of planning legislation. So the investigation process itself encompasses a number of stages. The first is obviously to establish actually whether or not planning permission is required or not. And this can become increasingly complicated when you start delving into the permitted development rights, both the order from 1995 and the subsequent multitude of amendments that have occurred since. But also it could come down to fundamentals of case law and whether or not actually development has occurred as a matter of fact and degree. If a breach has been established, the second point is then to seek to resolve the matter without formal action where possible. So that is almost government mandated as a way forward to try and bring people back into the planning system, getting an application in potentially for the development that's occurred, to be able to consult on it, to be able to consider it against the relevant development plan policies and material planning considerations. That is obviously then the next aim. If that doesn't happen, then it's about deciding whether or not to take action or not. And that is obviously one of the critical points in terms of the decision making of what happens next. Does it relate to an enforcement notice being served? Or is it the case that a decision is made in certain instances, and they are usually very small number, whether or not we would not take action and giving real cogent reasons why we have not taken enforcement action against the particular breaches themselves. I'm not going to go through the next bit of the report, which is more talking about the background of the different types of notices that can be served, because there are a number, as well as how the enforcement team works within the council. I think it is important to say that planning enforcement is one element of the council's work, but it has very clear linkages with other sections of the council, both in terms of the work that's carried out by we've just heard this evening about some information with regards to in this instance cars being left. You've got street scene enforcement that the enforcement team work with. You've got private sector housing, you've got empty properties, you've got the work that's done by community safety, you've got obviously the legal team, which plays a fundamental role in supporting the planning team. So it is something that pervades the council entirely. One of the things that often comes up and has been obviously mentioned to some extent already is about resourcing. And so the report does talk about the current resources that the council holds for planning enforcement. So we have two full-time equivalent members of the planning enforcement team. We have an enforcement officer and an enforcement assistant. They report directly to myself as planning applications manager. They are also supported by some work done by the planning technical team, primarily there to start the processing of planning applications, but also They obviously do assist in some of the enforcement work that's done, as well as obviously the planning officers themselves. So predominantly planning officers are dealing with their own caseload of between 40 to 60 planning applications, but they do come in and work with planning enforcement to look at reasons that go on enforcement notices, whether or not a judgment needs to be made as to whether or not consent would be granted if if an application wasn't actually going to come forward for the breach in itself. So there is resources are brought in, but predominantly the primary work done by enforcement is done by 2 officers. The report does provide some information gathered in 2 separate points. One in terms of a recent email call that I put out to colleagues at different local authorities, and also some information that was provided at a Kent Planning Officers Group meeting in December 2019 about resources at other local authorities. So that information has been provided within the report as well. The report does also talk about the legal resources, and I think that is particularly important because obviously it's reliant on different resourcing in different areas as mentioned, but also obviously that is it has its own limits as well. And obviously the report, I think it's 4.3, talks about the resources that are available in terms of prosecution for non-compliance with enforcement notices, or indeed prosecutions, direct prosecutions that come from, say, unauthorised works to listed buildings, or indeed works to protected trees. So in terms of section 5 of the report, that talks about complaints and formal action. And this is where we start to sort of get into the contention put forward about the speed of planning enforcement and also how it can be made more efficient. So in 2019, the council received 335 complaints that were logged by the planning enforcement team, with 78 of those being high priority cases. So I've obviously outlined what high priority cases are. And in 2020, there were 330 complaints with 74 high priority cases. Now, there is no defined timescale in service standards to resolving an individual enforcement complaint. Now, that is because in some instances, and this is talked about mainly in section 5.3 of the report, the complexity varies greatly with regards to planning breaches. It can be very, very straightforward in the sense of we can confirm within a 24-hour period that actually that doesn't need permission because that boundary fence can be erected up to a height of 2 meters if it's not adjacent to a highway or whatever it be. But actually some instances of investigations may take obviously sometimes a very significant amount of time, which relates to gathering various bits of evidence, assessing it against case law, potentially getting legal advice, interviews under caution and various different things. So there isn't a set service standard timescale. And so that complexity can sometimes cause, certainly I think, fair consternation amongst any complainant who may be wondering, well, what is actually going on with regards to the complaints that are going on and how they are progressing. The perception is the second issue, which I think comes to that contention, which is about what is enshrined in the council's enforcement protocol. And that is, again, is to try and bring people back into the planning system and actually try to assist those that have contravened planning legislation to actually get them to comply with planning legislation. Now, that in some instances, that is as straightforward as saying, remove that entity, whatever it be, if it's not going to be acceptable in any form or whatsoever. But obviously, it may be about, as I said, getting an application to come in to allow it to be considered against the development control framework. There are often delays outside the control of the local planning authority. This more than not is resulting in the appeals process. So when we serve an enforcement notice for a regular planning breach, that notice can be appealed. It may be a case that, say, a planning application has come in for, retrospective planning application has come in for something and that is refused, then that also can be appealed. The appeal process can take between, I think between 6 months to a year, if not longer. And in certain instances, it has certainly been longer with certain enforcement cases that we've had. And we hold action in abeyance until after that appeal, because obviously if we were to require works to occur and then a planning appeal was to find that actually no, the development is acceptable, the council would be obviously acting in quite a negligent fashion. But that can naturally hold up what happens. And it may be a case that even if an appeal is dismissed against a notice and the notice is upheld, it may well be that actually the period of compliance of that notice will start at the point that the appeal decision is made, and an inspector has the ability to extend compliance periods over and above what the council has asked for, in one instance from a period of 3 months to a period of 15 months for compliance, which again just delays after the appeal itself. And then it is a capacity issue. So the fourth point that I've raised in the report is about capacity, and it is about the fact that we have to prioritise given the staff and available resources that we have. There is a list of enforcement notices that were served in 2019 and 2020, which has come forward, which outlines 26 individual notices. And if members have had a look at that, they will see that there are certain instances where those notices have been complied with, but there are a significant number where that has either been part complied with or in fact it has been not complied with. And in a lot of instances, we are moving through the process to actually prosecute that non-compliance with those notices. That obviously, again, it can be a slightly long-winded process. And obviously at the moment, we are still in a situation where the courts are recovering after a period of some cessation, but we are moving through the process to get some of these cases into the courts to act on the non-compliance with the existing notices that have been served. So about the second point of the contention, which is about what can be done to make the system more efficient. So section 7 of the report talks about this, specifically with regards to an enforcement review that actually sort of it's sometimes wonderful that these things come about at the same time, because it's something that actually was due to occur last year, but due to circumstances didn't. And then we've subsequently had a decision which has raised the point that we should be looking into the planning enforcement service and making sure that we're reviewing our processes and procedures to ensure that they are as efficient as possible. And so 7.3 in the report talks about a staged approach to assessing planning enforcement at Thanet. One of those, the first bit, is a general review. And so planning enforcement protocol that's appended to the report was agreed or actually updated last in 2015. Now, the principles behind it still hold firm. They are still the ones enshrined by government guidance. But that enforcement protocol is looking to be reviewed to ensure that it is sufficiently up to date and sufficiently maybe encompasses some of the ways that we're looking to communicate with members of the public in terms of looking at outlining what we are doing and also how we will respond to complaints. It will also include a process mapping exercise to go through and understand about the journey of the complainant in terms of when they would be updated about certain action being taken and when not. And this then links to the second phase, which is about our use of systems. So we use the planning database, which holds all details about applications to record enforcement complaints. We are going to be investigating, and this came up last night at planning committee, about how we can both try and integrate that system with further use that we're using at the moment of Google in terms of recording information and getting the evidence ready for certain cases. But also about how we can potentially put that information online where to give those updates as we do with planning applications. So you can log in and see what the status of the planning application is, when the deadlines are and those sorts of things. In the same way, that same public access service is available, and some councils do use it to publicise about enforcement in terms of, is a case closed? Has a notice been served? If so, here's the notice. Obviously, there's a limited amount of information that we provide, because in some instances these are criminal investigations effectively because of the nature of the breaches. So the information is slightly limited, but that is an option that we would be looking at to try and open up to make it clear what's going on and at what stage enforcement complaints are at. It would also include looking at the council's website, potentially filtering the information that comes into us, and potentially provides automated updates for certain queries that may come in, if possible, about low-level breaches and where further advice can be found about what is permitted development, for example. Although that does seem to continue to change as the government moves forward with various bits and pieces. And then the last point is going to be, once all that work has been done, it is about looking at service standards and whether or not it would be appropriate to dictate certain service standards, potentially for certain types of complaints, and whether or not that would result in the correct outcomes with regards to the process. Because obviously, certain instances it would be foolish to rush into action, which would cost the council more and also would jeopardise more long-term action on certain issues. But at the same time, complaints and investigations cannot be open-ended. We are time limited. It's a long time period of 4 years for operational development and 10 years for the change of use of land from when the breach has actually occurred. But it is important that we don't have a enforcement process that drags itself out. And again, that obviously does have an impact of eroding public confidence in the planning system. But it would also be a case of looking at, in conjunction with talking to other sections, especially obviously we talked about legal, and obviously the involvement of finance and other bodies of the council, about whether or not there is an argument to formulate a business case for additional resourcing or external funding and those sorts of things. And that would be part of the enforcement review as well. So that's a sort of run through the report itself, and I'm happy to obviously answer any questions through the chair.
Okay, lovely. Thanks, Ian. Thank you very much. Speaking under 20.1, Councillor Garner.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. I'm pleased we have this opportunity to discuss the planning enforcement function at TDC this evening. Since being elected, I've had a number of interactions with the two members of the team, and I certainly appreciate how hard they work. 18 months ago, we all voted to declare a climate emergency and have since been proposing policy amendments to the local plan to further protect our natural environment and enhance the biodiversity across the district. Many of these new policies will result in planning applications being passed with tougher climate emergency biodiversity conditions. It is vital that not only do we work with developers to make sure they understand what we expect of them, but also that we have an enforcement function that makes sure that they do what's expected. As it stands, I do not believe the team is equipped to be able to do this. Currently, the enforcement team works in a reactive rather than a proactive way, as Ian has explained. On the whole, once a planning application is passed, developers are left to get on with it, and enforcement officers only get involved if they receive a complaint from a member of the public. Looking at some of the documentation attached to the agenda, which Ian has gone through, it's easy to see why. TDC's enforcement team of 2 is indeed the smallest in the county. I, of course, accept that we are under enormous financial pressures due to central government cuts and to pressures brought about by the pandemic. But the same pressures, though, are faced by all other Kent districts like Dover and Ashford, who each employ 4 officers for this vital function. We know that over the next few years there are likely to be a number of very large developments approved, and we will need a larger proactive planning enforcement function at TDC to make sure these developments are delivered in line with the new local plans, climate emergency and biodiversity conditions. I would like to suggest that we set up a scrutiny project urgently to conduct a proper open review into the effectiveness of the enforcement function within planning as a whole, and to explore ways in which it can be expanded and improved. And I would ask members to consider this during their discussion this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garner. Councillor Moore.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ian, for your presentation. My query is fourfold, so I hope you've got a pen handy, and maybe you'd like to answer them in order. With any planning application, we have to pay a planning fee. And so why is it not that if someone doesn't have a planning application, and obviously enforcement is a reactive process, why are we not penalising them by fining them? Is it something that we could do, or is it this government-led through law? Because if someone is fined for not having the appropriate planning application, that would be something to deter them. The second one is continuity of enforcement. I know of 2 properties within 4-door area. One was made to remove their UPVC windows. The second property was reported, and they've seemingly got away with it. So is there a sort of a deadline timescale where enforcement expires and you can no longer do it? So I know you mentioned that there's no timescale for enforcement, but how long do we have to leave it before you take those people to task? Because if it's there for years or 2 years, surely we're running beyond the timescale of being diligent in bringing them to order. And lastly, as we mentioned at the planning application form, it would be nice to see when these enforcement or reactive plans are produced, that we can see an update, because I know your team is of 2, but as I said before, it'd be nice where the councillors could go on somewhere, log in with a password and see how these applications are progressing, or how the enforcement team are progressing with dealing with them. Thank you.
Did you want to respond to that, Ian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the first point about fining, it is governed by national legislation. So planning applications require a fee for processing. That fee is nationally set. Provisions aren't there in national legislation for fines to be imposed by local planning authorities for enforcement breaches. So we don't have the power to do it. I'm going to say unfortunately. I'm going to say that because I think that's, it's something, but it's not under our gift, unfortunately. The second point about continuity, I take Councillor Moore's point. I think that we do want to ensure that we are being consistent, but obviously there are going to be sometimes intricate differences between different cases, even when they may be in a very, very small radius. I think the point about timescales is that from a breach occurring, we have 4 years in which to take action, so serving a notice. And that's the important thing. It's not about us asking them to remove it. It's the serving of the notice and the notice going on the register. After 4 years, it becomes lawful by virtue of the fact that we haven't taken enforcement action. So again, it's not our intention to make enforcement investigations last for 4 years, because obviously that just wouldn't make any sense whatsoever. But obviously in terms of when we get to certain complaints, and this is why we look to prioritise, it's about ensuring that if it's, say in this example, probably in a conservation area, that we are acting on it within a timely fashion to move things forward, and especially if there are instances in a surrounding area where it's happening, because as referenced by the member of the public, it can be a case that these things do spread, and obviously we don't want that to happen, and we want the public perception of certain areas that are designated like conservation areas to be upheld. And to pick up the point about access for members to information, that is exactly one of the points of the review in terms of this idea of public access to enforcement information, which would obviously be available to ward councillors as well. There are, as I say, councils that are using it. Members can visit, off the top of my head, I think it's Southampton was one that I was looking at, who use the same program as us. It will look very similar to the planning pages on the Thanet's website in terms of searching a planning application, but you can search enforcement cases as well. So that is something that we are certainly looking into. We don't have the access through the current system to do that, and so there is would be a cost implication to that, but that will be part of the review to work out how it could be funded, potentially to provide, if it would provide the benefits that we think it would.
Thank you. Councillor Huxley.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ian, for your presentation. I think you've made the case for having more planning enforcement officers, surely, at TDC, compared to Dover District Council, which has probably similar problems to us, listed buildings, etc. They have 4 officers, full-time officers. We only have 2. Surely there is a business case for increasing our staff numbers, both in planning enforcement and in legal department. And I think it's a good idea, as other people have said, like Councillor Garner, to put planning enforcement notices on the TDC website so we can search on those, just like planning applications. And Councillor Garner, I agree with him. I think there should be some sort of working party from Scrutiny to look into these issues. Thanks a lot.
Okay, Councillor Keane.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I also wanted to support Councillor Garner's idea that this should be scrutinised, because it does seem there's a good case for looking at the a number of people we've got for enforcement of this. But I also wanted just to raise on the bigger developments that we've had, and obviously we've got more coming through, where the pictures that we're given for planning have lots of nice landscaping and play areas and that, but often they don't seem to be delivered in quite that way, or are very slow to be delivered. And if you've got any comments on that and how that is enforced currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bayford. So I think to pick up the point with regards to landscaping the bigger developments and linking into Councillor Garner's point as well, we do have within the planning applications team, we have a planning assistant who predominantly deals with planning conditions. So through the submission of condition details, it's a lower level consent regime, and that officer does work very closely with the enforcement team as well, because obviously if going out on site, etc., and will discover that something hasn't been done in terms of the whatever the planning permission requires, may well result in obviously an enforcement investigation occurring. Yes, it is the case that obviously the council has large strategic allocations. We have currently planning applications that are under consideration for significant scale developments, as well as developments that have already been granted planning permission, which will have quite significant areas of housing development, as well as open space and landscaping. So it is going to be imperative that all elements of the planning team, both the planning officers who wrote the conditions officer, and also planning enforcement, are all involved in actually making sure that the development turns out as was proposed and as was approved. Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Roper.
In the light of some of the other councillors' comments, can I propose a scrutiny review of enforcement, please? Is that possible?
Councillor Roper, I think it's clear that there is a will amongst members for a scrutiny review, but like all other areas of the council, scrutiny has limited resource as well. What I'd like to propose is that I take away the sentiment that we would like a scrutiny review, and discuss with officers what the scope of that review may be, what resource we would need to service it, and bring back to the next scrutiny committee a proposal, hopefully that we will carry out a review, or to explain why perhaps at this point in time we wouldn't be able to. We did at one stage suggest that we would have one sort of side operation going at a time, and we've still got the memorials working party working. I think that may be coming to an end of its work, but if members would agree, I'll take away the sentiment and bring back a proposal to the next scrutiny meeting. Do members agree with that?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can see quite a lot of nodding. I can't see any other questions or people wanting to speak. Ian, can I thank you? Your second late night. You'll be getting used to this. Thank you very much for that. Very comprehensive report. Obviously, I'll be talking to you with other officers about what sort of review we might do. I think there's definitely a will to have that from the panel. So could I ask members to note the report, and the fact that we will be bringing back a proposal regarding a review. Is that agreed? Thank you. Thank you very much. Agenda item 10, review of the OSP work programme. This has been published. I ask members to note the report. Lots of nodding, that's great, thank you. And agenda item 11, forward plan and exempt cabinet report list for period 9, December 2020, 31st of May 2021. It says on here, unless there's something from the plan that the panel would wish to consider, members are asked to note the report. Lots of nodding, so thank you very much. Members, officers, a member of the public, it's been a very long evening. I think a very good evening, very interesting evening. So thank you for your contributions and I wish you good night. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.